Paul Symon, welcome to ASPI.
Thanks, Ron.
Paul, what does ASIS do today?
Three main functions. Firstly, it collects intelligence, as we did on the 13th of May 1952, and we continue to obtain for our government intelligence from overseas. The second function is what I would broadly describe as intelligence diplomacy. The fact that we have counterpart organisations almost in every country in the world, and intelligence agencies talk to intelligence agencies, they share information, they will often have conversations where that line of communication can be on some very sensitive subjects that the diplomats would prefer not to have, or indeed countries, the other side, would prefer that the conversation be held between intelligence chiefs rather than diplomats. So there's that element of intelligence diplomacy. The other element of intelligence diplomacy is in the region, in our near region, there are countries that actually need some support and help, some capability uplift to let them defend their own national sovereignty better than they currently are. So again, we sort of help with training programs and deliver some capabilities to countries in our near region. So that's the second. So firstly, collect intelligence. Secondly, intelligence diplomacy. The third main one, under the Act, the Intelligence Services Act, there is a Section 6(1)(e) provision which indicates that the Minister can direct us to do activities, and that has obviously the ability then, that gives the government the ability that if they wish for us to undertake disruptions or activities that are probably going to be enabled by good intelligence but actually allow us to undertake disruptions, whether it's disrupting a terrorist plot or some type of activity where there is an action that occurs, that's the third broad category. So those activities I can't authorise, they have to be authorised by the Minister, and the way the Act is written is that if the Minister so authorises an activity like that, she needs to also consult other ministers, including the Prime Minister, who may be affected or impacted by those activities that we do.
Where does human intelligence fit in the cyber age, the digital age?
Well, humans are a social animal, and humans really with other forms of intelligence, you mentioned cyber, well-informed, thoughtful individuals will recognise and appreciate that what they say over telecommunications devices, what they send by way of email. There are other agencies that can collect that type of intelligence, and a lot of people know that and therefore avoid that form of communication. So, really what most countries need is a combination of cyber, SIGINT, HUMINT. Humans will develop relationships, trusting relationships. They will share secrets. They are willing to, in many cases, build a relationship with a service like ours that cultivates, recruits, validates them, and there's a relationship that builds. And so when you're trying to understand senior leaders around the region, more further afield, you're really trying to understand the way they're thinking, their vision for their country, the risks that they see, the opportunities they see. Those sorts of conversations are normally held in the inner circles, and it's between humans, and it will always remain that way.
Why are people willing to take these risks? Why are people willing to betray their country's secrets?
Well, I mean, there can be a range of reasons. I guess as a general proposition, I would argue that if you're in a closed society, then there is a stronger possibility that you will be concerned about the direction of the country. You know, if people become leaders of everything in their country, if power is concentrated and centralised, then ultimately you become responsible for everything, and you actually become responsible for the way in which your citizens perceive your leadership. So there's an interesting sort of medium to long term dimension to this. As a general rule, closed societies run the risk of a greater number of individuals willing to betray the secrets of their country because they're not happy. They don't get a voice. We get a voice every 3 years. We go down to the local school and we vote. But there are a lot of people that don't. So look, I mean, that's one motivation.
ASIO says that the threat from espionage and foreign interference to Australian interests is extensive, unrelenting, and increasingly sophisticated. What does that mean for ASIS?
Well, it means that we need to innovate and we need to stay ahead. So there's a really compelling culture in ASIS to understand technology, emerging technology, to look at the environment in relation to startups, new and emerging technologies. How could new and emerging technologies be adapted to allow us to undertake the risky activities we undertake, and to reduce, if you like, the risks of being compromised. So there is a competition at play here, and in many ways, you know, if you think of the match analogy, we're playing the attack in ASIS, and ASIO by and large is playing the defence. The margins between the two overseas are close. We believe that we still have a marginal advantage to obtaining the secrets that we obtain, but we don't rest on our laurels and we can't afford to be complacent. That's why science, technology is an important component to the way we think about our tradecraft.
Moving from that first 4 decades of the Cold War, how does ASIS operate in a new environment where you're thinking about grey zone activities, disinformation, multipolar, great power competition? What does that mean for the sorts of choices you have to make?
Well, I think it sort of follows on from that last question. The operating environment's getting harder, and therefore we have to double up in our determination to use technology, to have the quality of the people that we need to deal with, as you say, the grey zone environment. The grey zone is really it's increasingly being used in the lexicon to reflect the fact that we're in this environment of coercion short of conflict. And that is keenly felt inside the intelligence community, whether it's on the defence or on the offence. So the other comment I'd make is it's often a term that the military are using, and I think the military, our military and other militaries around the world are thinking very, very carefully around coercion short of conflict and the role of the military. Now, we cooperate with and work very closely with the Australian Defence Force, with the Australian military. So not only do we have to stay across the best of technologies coming through and emerging technologies, but our partnership with Defence has to get even deeper and stronger, and I think that's really driving us at the moment.
What is the legal basis for what you do?
The Intelligence Services Act 2001 is the legal basis. Anyone that's watching this can get on the internet, put in Intelligence Services Act 2001, and it's there. Section 6, which relates to the roles and functions of ASIS, amended quite recently, as you've mentioned before, all of those amendments in there. It's laid out. That's the legal basis upon which we are held to account. Held to account politically by my minister, the Foreign Minister, to whom I'm answerable. Answerable in an accountability sense to the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, who has the powers of a standing royal commission. IGIS and the staff of the Inspector General literally drop onto my computer systems, my highly classified systems. They can look at any files. It's all made available to them, so that at any point in time, if they have concerns about legality or propriety of what we're doing, they can actually go in and have a look. And then to Parliament through the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, which looks more at our administrative sort of aspects of the service. But it's there in the Intelligence Services Act, and it's observed in the breach every day, either by the Minister or by the Inspector General.
Every day as you sit down, how do you think about those checks and balances? How does that frame the way you approach each day?
Well, I think it's meant that a couple of things. One is that the training of our people has to be very well bedded on an understanding of the law, the meaning of propriety and legality, understand the functions and purposes. I can't, and senior officers can't micromanage our people in the field. They have to make judgments when they're dealing with an agent, that are very, very fine judgments indeed. And so they need the understanding of the law and the basis upon which they are undertaking activities in the national interest has to be something that is very, very well understood. What it also, though, has meant is that inside ASIS, I think there is this outstanding written record of everything we do. If you looked at our internal correspondence, literally all of our activities are written up in great detail. And when I say great detail, I'm not only talking the nature of a meeting with an agent and the conversation and the intelligence or the information that's passed, but considerable detail about body language, personal life. All of that is recorded because we're always wanting to check and validate that the information we're getting is accurate, that the agent themselves are on are at a point in their life where they're not getting distracted, they're not being coerced. There's a lot of things that we're checking on as we build a relationship with our agents. So everything's very well written down inside the service. So coming back to your question, it manifests itself in our people having a really good understanding of the law and the proper purpose and function of the service, and a very strong written record of everything we do, which obliges them to be honest and to write down everything that they see and observe and hear.
Using that officer-agent approach, you've said that ASIS isn't just about providing context and information. It has to make a difference to government. It has to enable outcomes and actions. How do you measure that?
We're actually measured by other agencies, and I'll come to that, but we also are pretty demanding on ourselves. And by demanding on ourselves, I say, we're awash with information, open source information. Very much the mantra inside ASIS is the quality of the insights that we're able to help policymakers understand. In other words, getting as close to decision makers, foreign decision makers, as we can to provide the quality insights that our policymakers need. So we're pretty demanding on ourselves around the quality of the insights. If we get information from an agent and it doesn't substantially add value to that's in the public domain, we won't publish it. So we set pretty high standards internally. But we also are evaluated, and this is one of the functions that O&I has really stepped up with. So we have mission evaluations, and it might, a mission might be counter-terrorism. So each year, a range of agencies in town, both policy and intelligence agencies, are asked to mark our homework, and they speak very openly and honestly about how we've added value to the counter-terrorist understanding inside Australia. And so, of course, ASIO would be asked, the Federal Police would be asked, policy agencies are asked. So those reports are done on an annual basis across a whole spectrum of areas. So, we undergo scrutiny from other policy and intelligence agencies, and O&I pull that together. We've literally just finished a round of evaluations and come under the spotlight from other agencies.
Let's finish this with a discussion of risk. How much harder is it? How much riskier is it to actually get human intelligence now?
Well, there's always been risk involved, and perhaps if I just quickly talk about risk. I mean, we, as I think I've said before, we accept risk. We can't be cavalier. There is a very strong thread of education, knowledge and understanding about risk management. We have a whole area separate of the operational line areas that undertake compliance and risk management. So they oversight operations independently to ensure that the risk management techniques are adopted in the way that many organisations think about risk and risk management. So international standard 31,000, ISO 31,000, which is the international standard for risk management, how you assess risks, how you look at the likelihood of those risks being realised, the consequences of those risks. Every activity we do is written up in considerable detail and planned in considerable detail. The vast majority of those activities in the planning stage contain the risk management plan. So, risk has always been part and parcel of what we've done, but I would say it's deeply entrenched in the way that we think about our activities and our operations. And depending on the overall risk at the end, the overall risk determines who ultimately is the delegate to approve an activity or an operation. So obviously the highest risk ones, I'll be the delegate. But there are lower, moderate, low risk activities where people at lower levels can approve the activities and operations. I think we've got it about right in terms of strong thread of risk right through the organisation and the way we plan activities, but an agility through the delegation of the overall risk that allows us to generate activities quite quickly, certainly at the more low to moderate end. Obviously the high risk activities, I take responsibility for those in case they're compromised.
When those high risk calls land on your desk, what is the value threshold, the risk threshold that you use to decide I am willing to put this person's life at risk because I want these pieces of information? How do you make those judgments?
Well, it's judgment, isn't it? There's more art than science on these sorts of things, but at the end of the day, it is simply you're staring at the benefits, what the benefits would be for policymakers, what the benefit would be in the national interest, and having to weigh that against the risks that we have to live with in obtaining that information. If we think the benefit is there, it might be that we redo the risks over and over again. In other words, think about every vector to achieve the outcome without necessarily following the first plan that comes forward. So often, if the benefit's there, it won't follow that we'll necessarily undertake the activity in the way that it's first been planned. It may well be that it goes back and we say, okay, what other other vectors, what other opportunities, what other ints could we use to achieve that effect? And that's where agencies like us and ASD work very closely together to see, if we don't need to take the risk up to a particular threshold, if I can keep the risk down and still obtain the benefit, then obviously that's what I will do. But we are a risk accepting organisation. There are many activities that we do that means that you don't sleep as well at night as you might like to, but we've deduced that the benefits are worth it in the national interest.
Finish this by talking to me a little bit about how you weigh that risk and accountability equation, how you think that through if you're going to have to be thinking about this as you go to bed at night. How does that work for you as the Director General?
Well, it means trust. Trust becomes everything, and I have to trust my people and know my people to be able to trust them in the way they're engaging with the risk. It's also true that my relationship with my minister and the trust that goes with that relationship is really important. And the foreign minister, for example, carries a heavy burden because she is our chief diplomat. She's advancing Australia's interests every day, and she has to have faith that we will conscientiously and diligently undertake activities. We will plan them very, very carefully, and we will do everything within our power to mitigate the risks. But she, like the other side of politics, has been a beneficiary of ASIS's most extraordinary activities and operations, and very much appreciates what we do. So the trust is everything in this business.
Paul Symon, thank you.
Thanks, Grant.